Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. Several public school teachers in Rochester, New York were put on leave after exchanging text messages that made racist and demeaning references to students. Reportedly, the teachers worked at Enrico Fermi School 17, which has a large percentage of Black and Latino students in pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. We will discuss that. And also this morning, as graduation season rolls on, federal student loan debt remains a hot button topic, and progressive Democrats in Congress, such as Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, continue to pressure President Joe Biden to cancel up to $50,000 of student loan debt. We discussed that and more with James Wright of the Washington Informer, and also joining us this morning is educational equity leader, author, speaker, and founder of the nonprofit Teachers Who Pray, Marilyn Rains, who is also an education consultant specializing in the intersectionality of race, faith, and public education. Good morning, Marilyn and James.
Good morning.
Good morning, Stacey.
And I should mention that Marilyn's book, James, The Master Teacher, 12 Spiritual Lessons That Can Transform Schools and Revolutionize Public Education, is studied in a course at Harvard Graduate School of Education. So welcome to the program, Marilyn.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So this morning we began, teachers discovered a series, students, I should say, discovered a series of texts, including one containing an obscenity that wished one girl would beat up another. Another obscene text suggested an automated call that insulted children and their parents. The discovery comes weeks after Rochester school officials said they were investigating allegations that a white teacher told his 7th grade class of mostly Black students to pick seeds out of cotton and put on handcuffs during lessons on slavery. This, Marilyn, you taught for a long time.
Yeah.
When you hear something like this, Marilyn, what goes through your mind when you think about the students hearing this from these teachers, this racist behavior?
Oh, yeah. Teachers, I think there's a misconception that teachers are like a special breed of human beings who don't have issues that affect society. We don't have bad marriages. We don't get sick. We are always happy. And we're never racist because we're a teacher. And that is everything far from the truth. Education is a microcosm of society. Schools are a microcosm of society. You have racist people in society and they get jobs as teachers. And that's just the reality of it. The best I think we can do to kind of hold that down is to, make racism and discussions about history a prominent part of teacher education, because teachers, they don't get that. So if you're raised in a family that's racist, or you grew up in an all white community, and you go into a community that's not like yours, be it Black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, you're uneducated about that community and their history and their struggle and the systematic ways in which they've been oppressed. And so you take at face value that they're in whatever condition they're in because of something they did wrong. And I think that happens very often. And, you can pass through all your education and not get a multicultural class, not one, not required. So it's not at all surprising to me, though it's unfortunate, and it's, we need to do more to help, because more than 80% of the teaching force is white.
And that poses another issue, right, James? Needing teachers. There's many studies that show that when kids of color, black kids, Latino kids, have teachers who look like them, they fare so much better. And also, James, I read a study that says white students fare better when they have teachers of color.
I would have to agree. Let me just say that I am the son of 2 educators, And along the point that was earlier made that you made, Stacy, about the teachers texting about the students. Well, that wasn't my experience coming up under my parents. They talked mainly about the principal and the administration. They rarely talked about the students. But you're absolutely right about the fact that that students, whether they're black or white or brown, learn better under educators of color because they're more serious about their jobs. They're more focused about their jobs. Educators of color tend to be more sensitive to the needs of their students, whether it is no matter what color. Those surveys have borne that out. My parents are a indication of that. And so it just doesn't surprise me, but I would even go out on a limb and say that those teachers that sent those silly texts about children, why you want to talk about children, and it would be Teach for America people. And I know I may offend some people, but I don't care. They maybe Teach for America and didn't do what Maryland did, which is go through the basics in terms of learning and educating themselves about being educators.
Well, Rochester City School District Superintendent Leslie Myers Small said in a prepared statement that she is horrified at the racist and demeaning references and language used to describe children. She says, our children, the staff members have been put on leave, and the district will use all forms of available discipline up to and including termination. But Maryland, we hear so much about critical race theory, about teaching history in schools. When you got the teachers now, so you have that going against students, all students, not just students of color, because all students need to know real history, right? And now you have teachers, and you mentioned something that's really interesting. You said more than 80% or 80% of teachers are white. How does all this play into this? We know politicians, particularly those on in the GOP, don't want certain history taught, but how does this all play into the curriculum when you have such a void in history, and then you have teachers spewing racist hatred messages?
I think, it's unique that these teachers' text messages were found out. But even if they never found those text messages, can you imagine how they were presenting themselves to students, right? It's how the subtle messages that you send to students in the classroom. Kids are so perceptive. They understand whether you like them or not, even if they're never exposed. So, when it comes to curriculum, that is, it's a real issue. And I think that it's an important issue because everybody needs to know the truth. That's the only way we're set free, right? We're set free by the truth. And we keep people oppressed when we don't give them all the information. We only give a certain amount of information. So that is an issue. But I think even in this situation, this is a toxic situation. You can tell. And I can only imagine if my kids were at that school, how I would feel knowing that their teacher, who they not necessarily trust, but they are subjected to day after day for hours on end, feel so negatively about them. And that's really what we've been trying to do with Teachers Who Pray, is kind of help teachers to understand it's not always what you say, is how you say, is what's in your heart. Because your heart is negative toward the kids, it's going to show up in multiple ways, and it breaks the kids' spirits. And that is, I think that is like the undertone that a lot of times we want to talk about curriculum, but you can teach anything badly, and you can teach critical race theory very badly if you yourself are not educated. So the teachers, I guess what I'm trying to say is the teachers need to be educated in order to educate somebody else. And obviously in Rochester, that particular school, those teachers were not educated, and they had also a lot of baggage that they were bringing to the table. So it gets really really deep in classroom.
Well,
settings.
And speaking of solutions, and you mentioned your the organization you founded, Teachers Who Pray, but how do you handle this? What's the solution here? We talk about having solutions to these issues. You mentioned that 80% of the teachers are white or other. When you have that large percentage, and then you know that based on these text messages and other things that have happened, not just in Rochester, but across the country, you have racist teachers, as you spoke about. What solution does the district have, or say a superintendent has, other than, I mean, termination, of course, when it's something like that, most will say termination is deserved, but it's not going to get rid of the root of the problem. How do you attack the root of the problem?
Yeah, it's so deep. It's basically, how do you dismantle racism in school settings? And that is a very, I mean, it's all hands on deck. You throw everything at it that you possibly can. And so one way is making them an example and saying we're not going to tolerate it and firing them, right? But that's a band-aid, right? There are organizations, we talked about like having more Black teachers, and that's a whole nother story as to why we don't have as many African American teachers anymore. But I don't know if we have time to go into that. But so we do need to recruit more Black people and brown people to become teachers. It's not a very attractive career right now. But also, we have to educate the white teachers. We have to pour resources into that, and particularly as they are beginning their teaching career and early on. And, maybe giving them opportunities while they're still students to go into communities of color and practice teaching before they get their credential.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways you can do the programming for certificates.
Well, James is saying role playing in classrooms is not a bad teaching tool. James, you want to explain that as we bring in the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publicists Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, and a special good morning to our guests. Thank you so much for your perspectives. We in the Black press, education is so important, and you're right about having teachers in the classroom to reflect who they're teaching. I think that across the board, we used to do a lot of teachers were looked up to in the Black community. Principals were looked up to in the Black community. We have to change our cultural appreciation of the teaching profession. And I think that particularly African American teachers, I was just talking to the president of NEA with 3,000 members is a lot. She's a school teacher. And she was also saying the challenges that people face today. First of all, teachers are not paid enough. Mm-hmm. They are the most hardworking profession and underpaid.
Yes.
And and the old axiom is you get what you pay for. And I don't think our society has put a priority, Stacey, on teaching, on educating. I think our records compared to other countries of the world in terms of equipping young people with the best education possible leaves a lot to be desired in public. But I'm a strong advocate of public school systems. So it's reinvestment. I think that in New York and other states across the country, there needs to be reinvesting in our children, reinvesting in the teaching profession. And she's right. You can't dismantle racism overnight. It takes a period. People bring racism before they go to college. From pre-K to 12, racism is incorporated in people's mindset. And so to dismantle that takes time. But I think we should set clear goals. I think every school system should say that this is going to be no toleration of racial discrimination, no toleration of racial slurs, epithets, and I think teachers have to set the example to transcend the past and look toward building a better future for all students, no matter what their race may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And James, again, you mentioned role playing in classrooms. Can you just expand on that just a little bit?
Sure. When I was in the seventh grade, I was bused, and we went to a school called Pierce Junior High School, named after a Confederate general, but that's now named after a Black woman, my junior high school. But now we did a reversal. Coach Hundal had the Black and the Mexican American students be the masters, and the white students be the slaves. And so we had an interaction which was very interesting, because many of the white students had no idea about some of the issues that Black people and brown people face in their everyday lives at that particular time. And so this is what I'm saying: role playing in classrooms is not a bad teaching tool, but it must be done responsibly. I don't see anything wrong with a curriculum or a teacher having a situation where students learn how to, take apart the cotton, but it just can't be the Black students. It has to be the white students who have to learn how to do that and to get a sense of what that's like. So I'm all for role playing in terms of education, but it must be done responsibly. And in Rochester, it was not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an issue worth keeping our eye on as we move on to student loan debt. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer have proposed legislation that would cancel up to $50,000 of student loans for federal student loan borrowers who earn up to $125,000 in annual income, with talk of the president considering canceling $10,000 in student debt, something the NAACP says isn't nearly enough. The progressives have asked the president to hold off on any student loan cancellation until they can meet with him to discuss the merits of more student loan cancellation. Now, it should be noted that the Biden administration thus far has canceled more than $17 billion of student loans since they came into office. But Marilyn, when we talk about student loan debt, you're currently pursuing your PhD. Perhaps you could speak a little bit to perhaps yourself or others who have to deal with student loan debt.
Well, I paid off my undergraduate and graduate student loans, and I vowed that I would not take out another student loan. And even now, I'm in a situation where I'm considering doing it, but I don't want to, because see, what happens is it's layered, just like what we just talked about. So we assess scholarship funds on standardized tests, right? A lot of times the ACT, SAT, and the our students don't always do as well on those tests, and so they don't get as much money, and then they have to take out the loans, even if they are straight A students, right? Or if they have done a ton of undergraduate or volunteer work. It doesn't equate always to the caliber of having like a top score on an ACT test. And so even in how we are measuring how qualified somebody is to get a top scholarship, it's biased. And so then really high, very smart students who will excel in college are forced to get loans because they didn't do this ACT prep that, costs a lot of money and have the time because they may be working a side job, and they don't have tutors. So it's all kind of built in to make us take out these loans. And it's really not fair. So it's how the system is structured, how the resources are distributed works against students of color, particularly low income students of color who can't afford all these, cap in these prep classes. So, my issue with just erasing the debt is, how are you going to fix the system? Like, well, this group of people who have these loans, they are forgiven. But what about this next generation of college students? Like, are they going to have to take out loans? Like, we need to fix this system, because otherwise, every so often we're going to be talking about erasing the debt, and that makes no sense to me.
So it's a structural problem, right? James, Marilyn just laid out because, okay, the president, if he eliminates the debt, she's saying that the students that's coming behind these students and the students that come after them, it's a cycle.
Yes, it is. And she's absolutely right. And it was very astute of her to point that out. Even if you were to wipe out the debt of people who are presently holding student loans, what about the next generation? Very astute of her to point that out. This is a sign that the Sanders agenda, I'll call it the Bernie Sanders agenda, is creeping into the American mainstream. Stacey, if you had talked about this 10 years ago, you would have been laughed out of the room, the idea of canceling student debt. But because the progressive movement has brought this up and made this mainstream, this is why some sort of debt cancellation is a reality. Now, the NAACP wants $50,000. I'm a member of the NAACP. I want $50,000, but I will take $10,000 for now. I'll take any type of student debt cancellation. I think it helps everybody. I really do. I think it really helps people.
Well, Dr. Nicole McDaniel, it's interesting. Marilyn is pursuing her PhD now. She's going to receive her PhD soon. Nicole, my sister, just will be walking next week after getting her PhD. She says another problem is that if the federal aid policies are not also changed, we will find the debt back up where it is in another 20, 30 years or so. She says even these same students will reborrow and find themselves back in debt. It already happens. So when you hear that, Dr. Chavis, your thoughts on student debt. But here's the other thing, Dr. Chavis. Let me ask you this: is there a downside to canceling student debt?
No, I don't think there's a downside. I think there's an upside. But I think we are pointing to the wrong question. It's just not about debt cancellation. We should be talking about debt prevention. We should be talking about why is it in the Republic of Cuba, right off the coast of Florida, education is free from pre-K through graduate to postgraduate. How can Cuba offer free education and the United States cannot? Why is there a premium on the truth? Why is there a premium? I'm talking about a financial premium. Why do people have to pay for knowledge? There's something wrong with that. And particularly in a highly sophisticated technological society like the United States. You know, we said we're the most wealthiest country in the world, but we're the most poorest when it comes to contributing to the education of the next generation of leaders. So I'm into for debt prevention. Yes, cancel the debt, but don't prevent other debt. So is this a systemic problem? There were proposals earlier to have undergraduate education free or community college free, but Republicans oppose that. And so I think we need to go beyond the Bernie Sanders agenda, in my view. I think debt cancellation is a symptom. It is not the solution. I think we need debt prevention when it comes to education in America.
Well, Dr. Chavis, to your point, James is saying, he writes on the chat there that Cuba has a literacy rate of 99%. That's pretty amazing, James. And Marilyn, as an educator, Marilyn is an accomplished award-winning journalist and award-winning educator. So we got the full package with Marilyn here this morning. But as an educator, let's take it from the educator's point of view. Does that make it easier? How much easier, I should say, for an educator when the students come to class debt-free?
It makes a big difference. And the thing is, so many of our kids, Black kids, want to learn. They want to get an education. They want to go to college, but the money isn't there. And you'd be surprised. It's like $200 for books while they stay out of school. Yeah. Like, I just don't have I don't have $150 fee for this. So they sit out a whole semester of $150. You know, we have to do better. And then another thing is, when I became a teacher, I got a master's degree. I went through a program here in Chicago that said, you know what, we want mid-career changers. So I was a journalist with Stacy in New York. And, after 9/11, I just really felt God call me into education. And it blew my mind because I didn't want to be a teacher since the 3rd grade. Like, it's something early on that I wanted to do. But the reason why I was able to do it as a new mom, right, changing careers, going back to another state, starting all the way over, was because the program that I got into said, if you teach for 5 years, you won't have any loans. Mm-hmm. And you have to teach in an urban environment in Chicago for at least 5 years. We would give you a free master's degree, which I think at the time was worth $20,000. And we pay you $30,000 to live on as you are studying, as you are working in a school while you're getting your degree. And I was like, deal, because I want to do it anyway. And you make it very easy for me to get a free degree, and you're giving me a little change to pay the rent. And I was willing to leave a lucrative career in journalism just because I really wanted to teach at that point. So how much more would it be for students who have dreams, who really want to do something, just to make the path easy? And I've been able to do a lot of good with that degree and try to help students all over the country and teachers all over the country because I had that support. And we need to offer programs like that. Okay, we can strike a bargain. You get a free degree. If you are doing community service, you're going to serve your community in using your degree in some way to serve your community, and not just leave and go off into the suburbs and live a happy life forever after, right? But you're going to stay and you're going to invest in your community. We will educate you. And that's a cycle that we really do need to build up, because I don't believe in a such thing as a free lunch. I believe in giving back and helping. And that's the way to build that buy-in, right? When there's skin in the game and we have this understanding, because our communities need help. Like here in Chicago for Memorial Weekend, 50 people got shot and 9 people died in the span of 3 days in the city. And sometimes, I'm in Arkansas, I'm kind of in a rural, small town area. And I'm like, I really want to come back and bring my kids to Chicago when I know that those bullets are going to be flying on the holiday weekend. But it's home. So we can use this to elevate the conversation, not like Dr. Jarvis said, not just for getting rid of debt. How do we use this opportunity to invest in our community, make it better?
Yeah, and I have to tell you, Marilyn, our producer laughed out loud when you said lucrative journalism career. Those two never usually go together. Lucrative, but we get the point.
It was 20 years ago. It's not like it was now, right?
We had fun 20 years ago, right, Marilyn?
We did. Lucrative in non-monetary ways.
Yes, absolutely. Oh boy, Dr. Chavis, as we conclude this morning, our convention is coming up, 195 years of the Black Press of America. Don't forget to go to nnpa-events.com to register and join us in New Orleans for the 195th anniversary celebration. So many panels and discussions on topics that directly impact Black America. One of the conference sessions is titled The Black Press and the Antidote to Racism in America, an informed discussion led by Dr. David Childs of the University of Northern Kentucky. We also have some fun. There will be a social media cafe, a fitness class, lots of food, New Orleans food too. These conferences tend to have extensive meal options for everyone, and you don't want to miss the open night for the best of New Orleans music, cuisine, and dancing. And of course, Stephanie Mills is the highlight. She's going to perform exclusively for the Black Press on the Friday night of the convention, June 24th. So we're looking forward to that. Doc, anything else you want to add about the convention before we close?
Well, I just want to let Marilyn know that we also are going to be discussing education. We're going to be discussing teacher preparation and how to invest. I like the way Marilyn put it. Invest in our communities, invest in our educational system. I think that one of the things we learned in the Black Press for 195 years is that if we invest in our people, we invest in our communities, we invest in our teachers, our schools, we invest in our children, we will get a return on that investment.
Go to NMPA-events.com to register. The public is welcome. It's going to be great, and we're going to bring you so much more of that in the days to come. But thanks again for joining. Let it be known. We will see you tomorrow.